And good morning from Christchurch. We're broadcasting live this morning just across the road from the site where the CTV building used to sit. 115 people died in that building when that big earthquake struck 5 years ago. Behind me, 185 empty chairs signifying the number of people who died in the earthquake. Now, this morning, something a little different on Morning Report. You can watch us simulcast live on the website radionz.co.nz. We are going to be speaking this morning to the survivors of the earthquake, to some of the people who are still struggling 5 years on to get their compensation and payouts, and we'll have a look at the state of the rebuild, which is where we will start this morning with the Minister responsible for the Christchurch rebuild. The Minister, Jerry Brownlee, joins us now live. Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Guy.
How are we looking 5 years on?
Well, not too bad. Still, at times like this, all those issues that are causing most trouble in people's lives come to the fore. But if you look around the city, there's a huge amount of rebuild work that has been done, and a terrific amount of residential work also completed, with people getting back to rebuilding their lives over the past 5 years as well.
We'll go back to that shortly, to the state of the rebuild. If I could start, though, with the people. Is it good enough that 5 years on there are still somewhere over 4,600 people who haven't settled their claims?
Well, look, I'm not making any excuse for that, other than to say that settlement occurs when the keys are handed over for a new property, or it's been repaired, or there is a cash settlement paid into the bank of the claimant. So there will be a good number of that group, probably about half at least, who are in that process at the present time and heading towards that settlement. But the balance of them will be difficult cases. I know there was a call yesterday for the government to legislate in a way that would see it all fixed in the next 6 weeks. That could come at a huge cost to some individuals, and of course it's also not how we tend to operate insurance contracts in this country. And by and large, that insurance has been extremely successful and very, very helpful in the overall rebuild.
So you're not prepared to step in that respect. What do you mean when you say that could come at a huge cost?
Well, firstly, we constantly talk to the Insurance Council about the issues they have, and have, where possible, assisted to overcome problems. So various declarations from the court about the way in which some of the technical terms that are used by insurance companies can be applied as they interface with EQC. But if we were to step in a legislative fashion and we were requiring that everything was settled, then that would be picking winners and losers, and I think that's just a little inappropriate still at this point.
Do you believe that private insurers have kept faith with the people who have paid the premiums, with the customers?
Yes, I think overwhelmingly that's the case. If you think about the numbers of insurance settlements that have been reached over the last few years, and I think you'd have to agree that that is the point. If you look around the city at the moment, I'll guarantee underneath each of the tower cranes there is a huge insurance story that is largely successful. So while there will be people who are caught in it, remember that the total claims for this, individual claims, approached was top 700,000. So you break them down to commercial properties and to households with multiple claims, it becomes a lesser group of claimants, but nonetheless a massive challenge for both EQC and the private insurers.
One of the other big challenges for people in Christchurch is the psychological impact of this. I'm wondering whether, as the Minister who is advocating for Christchurch and the rebuild, you are concerned at all about the reports of mental health funding for Christchurch being reduced. Look, I know that that's not your specific area, but is that something you're raising with your Cabinet colleagues? Is that a concern to you?
It's a huge concern to the whole Cabinet. The psychosocial health of Christchurch is extremely important, and in the process we're going through at the moment, the arrangement for things down here between the government and the council, the advisory board that I had under the chair of Mrs. Shipley, Dame Jenny Shipley, made it very clear that the psychosocial health was a cause for concern and needed to be a priority for us, and it certainly is. Just on the funding, I think there is, there can be some dispute about how that funding is allocated, how it's accumulated, and then how it's applied on a population base. But that's not stopping us continuing to look at what we need to do to ensure that people do have the services they need.
When we look to the rebuild, when you look around this central city, there still are areas which do look like wastelands, and if you look at the anchor projects that you had said were so important, if I pick the convention centre, you said back in 2013 that was going to be an ignition, an acceleration, a way to bring business confidence back into the central city. But where are we with that project?
Well, it is disappointing that it hasn't gone more quickly. And there are people who say, well, if it had been left to the private sector, it'd be all done by now. But what they forget is that we're actually negotiating with the private sector to get it built. We're just the paying party. But on the behalf of the taxpayers, we've got to be reasonably cautious about the way we spend some of that money. And we've also got to make sure that we're not building an asset for the city that becomes a white elephant very quickly. So,
have you even got a final business case for the project?
Oh, the negotiations are well down the track. And I'm not going to prejudice any outcome by making any announcements this morning.
No, but there was a 2017 completion date. That was the schedule, wasn't it? But we're not going to hit that clearly.
One thing I've never done at any point is agree to any timelines that anyone else has put up. I think you've got to recognise that there are a whole lot of things that are moving parts here. As I said, the last thing the city will want in another 5 years is an asset that is of very little value and outdated. So what we're doing is going through a very cautious process, remembering that building also will be a significant anchor onto the Cathedral Square, and I think we're doing it about at the right pace. I would have liked it to be faster, but in the end you can only go as fast as the people you're negotiating with.
Sarah is going to wind up soon. Are you happy with the way that is run? I see your press release out today. You've got some figures which show that people are happy about some aspects of it, but when I look at their latest wellbeing survey, it showed just 29% of people were confident with the decisions that had been made by Sarah. That isn't a lot, is it?
Well, I think not many people will know the extent of the decisions to be made by Sarah, so the less, I suppose, popular ones will be the ones that are much more to the fore in people's minds when they answer surveys like that. But I think the transition that we're going through to greater input, in fact a leadership role for the Christchurch City Council is the right thing, and this is the right time for that to happen.
Does this mean the government steps back now? In April, when Sarah winds up, you've got the new legislation and the new structure taking over. Does it mean the government takes more of a back seat and gives the city back to local leadership to a greater degree?
Well, I think certainly a back seat, but not entirely out of the picture. And neither would you expect us to be, given the amount of investment the government's made here. But also, name another city council anywhere in the world that's had to deal with something as big as this, with all of the demands that go with it. There are plenty, perhaps, who could have, but haven't quite stepped up. And I think the way in which things are going to unfold here will be very much part of the future success of the city. And
you yourself, in the ministerial role, you are wanting to continue for the rest of the term?
Well, they are decisions for the Prime Minister. We've got to recognise that as we move from regeneration, from recovery, I should say, to regeneration. So we've been through the emergency phase, been through recovery.
Really, you suck! You've done a bad job!
Thank you!
Bad job!
Good on you, mate.
Bad job!
You should have a red flag on his truck.
One verdict.
Well, look, you get that. I mean, if you were able to talk to that guy, I'll guarantee that there's something that he's got going on that's not working well. And look, people do lash out. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's a serious question though. Are you wanting to stay in this job? Because I sensed a little bit of reluctance. Are you just technically saying it's for the PM to decide, or are you thinking, look, maybe I've done enough?
Well, I think it's a decision that has to be made collectively, and I think.
Do you want to?
Look, I'm not walking away from it by any manner of means, but I do think that if we're going to move from regeneration from recovery to regeneration, that is a different phase entirely, and I think we've got to make sure that we're seen to be in that position.
And so might that be a chance for you to hand over to someone else? Is that what you're telling me?
What I'm saying is that we haven't had that discussion. That's really what I'm saying.
All right. Look, thank you very much for joining us this morning, coming along here to the site. The 185 chairs behind us.
I would say that you organised that guy to come along here, but I'm not a cynic, as you know.
No, indeed not. No, he wasn't one of ours. But thank you very much for joining us this morning, Mr. Brownlee. Brownlee. Do really appreciate your time. That's the Earthquake Recovery Minister, Jerry Brownlee, talking to us live from Christchurch. Here we are, just across the road from the CTV building where 115 people died. 185 people died in that quake 5 years ago. Those of you who are watching this simulcast on our website, radionz.co.nz, will be able to see that behind me. And I will now talk to and bring in local government and the Mayor of Christchurch since 2013, Leanne Dalzell. Good morning to you, Leanne.
Good morning, Guy.
How are you feeling 5 years on from the quake? What are your thoughts today?
Well, this is always a really hard day, I think, for me personally, but for the many people throughout the city, because it takes you back to that moment where really our city changed forever. And the impact that it's had on people's lives hasn't been equal across the city. There have been people affected in different ways. And of course you've had, some people who've experienced, loss. They've lost a loved one. They've lost, they've seriously injured. The people that were dreadfully injured still carry the scars today. And of course there are people who lost their homes. So, it is a time of loss, but also 5 years on, there's an element of, seeing the new growth, seeing the regeneration, as the Minister spoke to. Regeneration speaks to restoration, but it also speaks to new growth, and there's incredible opportunity that always comes with a disaster like this.
Yeah, but some people, as you say, are left behind. I was in the Cathedral Square yesterday, roughly 1,000 people. That's about 5 times that many are still waiting for their claims to be settled. What, if anything, can you as Mayor do for those people?
Well, what I can do and what I hope for are two different things. What our council did was that we put a submission into central government with the legislation, the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Bill, and we said, look, this is an opportunity to put a statutory line in the sand. One, it can clarify the limitation period so that people can stop worrying.
So you wanted a deadline and didn't get it?
Well, we wanted a deadline, but not a deadline for settlement, because all that would do would be getting the insurance companies getting their cash, their checkbooks out and writing cheques, cash settling, and that's not what everyone wants. For some people that's the right answer, for others it isn't. What we wanted was to have a deadline by which, the claimant could have the right to go to mediation, fully qualified experts available for free. This is costing people a lot of money, but it's not just the money, it's the energy. It's just the sheer grind. I've seen people with folders full of information. And look, some people have got to a stage in their life where they go, I never expected to have to do this. Why do I have to rebuild my house at this stage in my life? Am I ever going to see this house rebuilt?
Okay, let's go to the bigger picture of the rebuild. I was speaking earlier to the Minister about the convention centre, some of those big anchor projects. It sounds like you have been left in the dark here.
Well, we haven't been briefed on the detail of that, and that's because it is...
That's extraordinary, and I'm sorry to interrupt there, but that seems amazing, doesn't it? That here you are as the Mayor of Christchurch, and you don't appear to have any idea exactly where the details are lying on those big anchor projects.
The previous council entered into an agreement with the government. It's called the cost sharing agreement, and under that agreement certain anchor projects had a lead role taken by one over the other. The Christchurch City Council had no role to play in the convention centre, so I guess that's the reason why. The convention centre is important to the city though for two reasons. One is that it recreates Christchurch as a great host city and a destination in its own right. But the second reason is that as soon as it's announced, and the number of 5-star rooms that come with it, the other elements of what is a precinct, the convention centre precinct, once that's announced, other decisions will be announced as well, because people are sitting back waiting for that announcement, and it was always intended to catalyse further developments within the CBD.
Just before you go this morning, what gives you hope 5 years on?
Look, just thinking back to February the 22nd and the weeks that followed, it was the way the communities came together, the way everyone just, put everything aside. It didn't matter politics, it didn't matter religion, it didn't matter whether you were police, whether you were serving, whether you were being paid, whether you were a volunteer, it didn't matter. Everyone came together and they created an environment that was so caring and so supportive. And the thing that I've learnt from our experience is that the stronger those community connections before a disaster strikes, the more quickly you will respond and the more quickly you will recover. And I think that gives our city great hope for the future.
All right, look, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We do really appreciate your time. That is the Christchurch Mayor, has been since 2013, Leanne Dalzell, speaking to us from Christchurch. We'll have more on the story of Christchurch 5 years on throughout the program on Morning Report this morning. But for the moment, it's back to you, Susie, in Wellington.
Thanks very much, Guy. And let's take a look at the traffic firstly.